What's going on, everybody? This is Randall Barnes, the founder of HBCU Pulse and host of HBCU Pulse Radio, in the building for another special edition of the show on today, where we are talking about all things HBCU football. Listen, Division II football is over. Division I football is over. But still, we got some postseason stuff going on. Listen, Ariel is not in today. She will be back really soon. So I brought in a special guest to recap just everything that went on this weekend and also the football season in general. My brother Kelly Flicks in the building, HBCU sports analyst, contributor for Laceup Podcast Network and HBCU Redzone. He also rocks with me on a Division II HBCU football space on Twitter. Kelly, how you doing today, man?
Man, I'm good, man. What's the big old deal? I think it's time to get into it. A lot of different football seasons have ended, and we still have a couple seasons that are still alive. We're looking forward to that Celebration Bowl and the Beach Bowl, but the playoffs has concluded for HBCUs, and it's some great matchups. You know what I mean? I think it's a lot to take away from it, and I can't wait to get into it.
Man, let's go on and get into it because, you talked about the Celebration Bowl. So I know for all of us, because you do your rankings on Twitter, we all thought that North Carolina Central was going to make it to the Celebration Bowl, but that didn't happen. Howard University made it to the Celebration Bowl, and it's a blessing. Flicks, I'm telling you, it's a blessing because we on Howard's radio station, Channel 142 HBCU. So it's great for me. We can talk about Howard on Howard Station. So, man, we got to go in and get into it. Howard's making the Celebration Bowl. They won the MEAC. They're the outright champions because there's no more co-champions. They're the outright MEAC champions for the first time since 1993, and they're going to the Celebration Bowl for the first time. And this is their second bowl game because they made the Heritage Bowl and they beat Southern back in the 90s. So now they're going to be in the Celebration Bowl and they're going to face either Prairie View or FAMU. So let's talk about the season. I want you, Flicks, to give us a retrospective on Howard University season and how you saw the season going and how they even got to this point.
Oh, I mean, it's been some type of season for Howard. I will say in the spring, I went ahead. I was on my boy Bridges podcast, and I thought that their season would probably go like around 5-6. So we got to that point. I think the most odd part probably would be the losses in non-conference. There were some non-conference games where we really thought that they could have won it. There was an Eastern Michigan game where we thought they could have won. They fared very well against FBS teams, right? But going into conference play, they only had about 1 or 2 wins. So it was a little shaky in the beginning for this Howard team. But one thing that didn't change was their health. Quentin Williams continued to stay healthy the whole year. Jared Hunter, the running back, continued to stay healthy. Eden James has been a breakout star for this Howard team this year. And then complete the three-headed monster, Ian Willer has been killing in special teams and kick return and punt return, really changing games. So this Howard team is a pretty fun team to watch. They took a couple tough losses. They lost to Hampton. Hampton came back on them within the first 5 games of the season. So it's been an up and down season for Howard. Even after losing to South Carolina State early in MEAC play, there were a lot of doubters of Howard. But Howard somehow stayed the course and was able to put a 50-piece on North Carolina Central. So they just slapped my top 10 in the face and said, I don't think so. You put us at 4, we deserve to be number 1. So this Howard team, to me, has begun to get better throughout the season. And in NFL, college, we see it all the time. The teams that get better throughout the season usually end up in championships, either winning them or developing that mindset. So we see a Howard team that has now took the reins of the MEAC, took the crown from North Carolina Central, and these seniors at Howard have now shown that they are the cream of the crop, which I think is most important. This senior class for Howard is heavy, right? We're talking about maybe 10, 15 senior starters this year, some guys that may get a chance to go to the NFL, and they have now proven that they belong to be on the biggest stage in HBCU football, and I love to see it.
It's been an honor just watching Howard because they've just given us so much to talk about. And I think that they flew under all of our radars because of just how things were going. I mean, they were the co-champions, but we know that North Carolina Central, they were the team last year. But you come in and you do well against Eastern Michigan, an FBS team that was not a slouch the year before, because they were like, oh, well, you played well against the FBS team, but they were a losing team last year. No, they were a winning team last year. They did their thing last year. And Howard was better than them for a half. Eden James, if he doesn't go out, they probably win that game. Like, it's just like Howard really had something going. People talked about them for that Morehouse game. Flicks, you know, I feel when it comes to folks talking down on D2 football, I don't care what it is, because a win is a win. I don't care. And Morehouse will be back. We know that. But, like, I think people, to a point, they really counted out Howard when they shouldn't have, because it's really hard to evaluate a team, especially in the MEAC, when they have all those out-of-conference games. So I want to ask you this, Flicks. Do you think that folks wrote off Howard too soon based on the out-of-conference record?
I would say the out-of-conference record, and of all the guys I've talked to, it's kind of been Quinn Williams. You know, I think everybody that follows HBCU football knows this Howard team goes based on how well Quinn Williams plays. You know, usually if he passes over 200 passing yards, they win the game. So I think a lot of people had hesitations because of that, but this Howard team is uber talented. You know, I talk about some of the offensive guys. I didn't even name a 6'7" left tackle named Aneem Dankwa out there. He's probably going to be an NFL prospect too. Defensively, you got a bunch of guys. Darian Brokenburr out there on the defensive line. Kenny Gallup is still out there. They have a litany of talent, a litany of guys out there that makes up a very talented roster. I think that this Howard team, the fact that they've been so healthy right now, being this healthy at this part of the season really helps you, and it's helped them get better every game. So I think this team, as underrated as they are, they've continued to get better despite the haters, despite the chatter, despite the naysayers of Howard and them not taking football serious. Howard has taken football extremely serious this year.
They have, and I think people need to stop the conversation around that, because it's clear that in all sports, Howard's doing what needs to be done. That's just a fact. You know, I'm not just saying it because we on here. I'm just saying it because it's a fact. You look around the basketball team, they won the MEAC championship, then they made the tournament, and they played Kansas pretty well in basketball. You see what they're doing in football. You see what they're doing in golf. Shout out to Steph Curry. So, like, I just really like what I'm seeing from Howard, but I didn't like to see this as someone that I sort of wanted to see Howard make the Celebration Bowl. I started sort of rooting for it as the season went on, because I wanted Howard and FAMU to make it so it could be the Hollywood Bowl, because I want to see the celebrities pop out, the attention, all the different stuff. But Flicks, we got to talk about that South Carolina State game, because that was one of Buddy Pugh's final games, and you have Jawan Howell on 27 attempts. He got 283 net yards, 3 touchdowns. You look at the passing numbers, Corey Fields Jr. had 19 yards passing, only 11 attempts. Flicks, you be breaking down the film. You know football. I call you a scout. Like, you know these teams. You know the roster. You know the playbook. How does that happen?
One way to beat Howard is to run the ball, you know, and this South Carolina State team, if this is one thing that they do well, it's running the football. You know, you spoke about Juwan Howell and how he's been playing. He's probably one of the best HBC running backs in the nation at this point. He's only a freshman. He's a young guy, big stature. Buddy Pugh found him a winner down there. You know, if Buddy Pugh left anything at South Carolina State, it's Juwan Howell. You know, and there's a couple other running backs back there that work pretty well with them, like Tyler Smith and guys like that. So, you know, even looking forward to the Celebration Bowl matchup, if it is FAMU, they have a bunch of good running backs too. If it is Prairie A&M, they have a bunch of good running backs too. So just looking at that Howard South Carolina State game, I don't think anybody could have predicted it. But I think something that went into it was the fact that it was South Carolina State's homecoming, right? That was the most packed I've ever seen those stands be. And I think the whole South Carolina State, if you go there, it's a trap. All of that played into this game. I think Howard went in there looking forward, looking to the next game. And South Carolina State this season has been going week to week. They run in week-to-week schools. How can we win this game? But Howard, they got in the way of Juwan Howell and got ran over.
And that's just the fact. Like 283 yards, only so many yards passing. Like, that is such a 1960s score. Like, that's something out like the civil rights movement, man. Like, I'm telling you, that's like the Jake Gay, the Eddie Robinson years out here, man. But that game was crazy. So we all thought, man, listen, it's going to be North Carolina Central. They're going back. We don't got nothing to worry about. But we still were excited about the game that followed, North Carolina Central versus Howard. They were talking about the co-championship. Trey Oliver had a lot to say, but it wasn't much to say when Howard put 50 on him and almost flipped the score. And Davius Richard, we'll talk about him in a second, he only had 77 yards passing. He had a really dope run for a touchdown. It was really cool, but it wasn't really a lot of highlights, and Howard really locked up. So I want to ask you this, Flicks, like, how did Howard win that game against a North Carolina Central team that we all thought was the #1 team in HBCU football?
Man, I got to chalk it up to the preparation down there at Howard, to be honest. You look at the two rosters, two super talented rosters, but it's going to take a lot of coaching to out scheme the other guy. I think Howard jumped out quick on them, really based on them scheme. They came out with some nice openers on offense to create a nice opening drive. And, one thing that's been going against North Carolina Central is their run defense. I mean, I don't know what it is with the MEAC, but certain teams' run defense just ain't there. And this North Carolina Central team has an issue with gap control at times. And really with Howard's going to run the ball. That's something that they're going to do. They might go RPO with Q Will, but at the end of the day, they're going to run the ball with Eden James and Jared Hunter. And once those guys start getting downhill behind those big linemen, like I mentioned with Aneem Dankwa, it gets a little ugly for your defense, right? You don't really want to be on your heels against this Howard team. There's a lot of times we see Howard, they get into the red zone, it's 1-2 plays and they're in. And I think that's honestly because North Carolina Central's defense was getting worn down. We saw a Howard team really go old school. You talk about some old school takes. They really went old school, decided just to run the ball, pound the rock, work that into play action, and really get up on this North Carolina Central team. Now, did I think that any team would put 50 points on North Carolina Central? No, never. I think there was no team. I mean, maybe UCLA might have been the only team, but I can tell you that might put up 50 on North Carolina Central. But Howard to put up 50? I mean, I think Coach just remembers the presser, the MEAC presser in the preseason that led to all this. You know what I mean? Coach Trey Oliver going, why would you want to see a rematch of this? And co-champions, and I think he remembered all that, man. I think that bulletin board was filled from week 0 all the way to week 8 when they played. And I think the team was fired up, the coach was fired up, and the 50 piece was sending a message.
Listen, that was a message. It was sent immediately. It was clear. It was an email on 5G. I'm telling you, man, like they got that clear. And then Howard goes on to beat Morgan State, and they're in the Celebration Bowl. So we're super excited for that. So before we move over to North Carolina Central in this FCS playoffs situation, I got to ask you this. So we don't know at this current moment who is going to be facing Howard. We think it's going to be FAMU, but Prairie View A&M, they might surprise us. So depending on who it is, and we can give a deeper breakdown at another time, but if it's Prairie View or FAMU, whoever comes out the SWAC, do we think that Howard has a good chance of winning the Celebration Bowl?
I mean, you got to take Howard serious. Even if you don't like Howard's team, they've proven it, right? They've beaten North Carolina Central, the team that we've all thought was the number one team HBCU football. They've gotten the wins, whether it be dirty, ugly, clean. They've done it a litany of ways. So you got to respect this Howard team. I think going into this game, if FAMU's in the game, I'd give FAMU the favorite. But if Howard's against Prairie View A&M, Howard's definitely the favorite. I think that just goes to show how good we think this Howard team is. I think Howard is better than the second team in the SWAC, however you want to put it, whether it be Alcorn, Jackson State, PV, whoever else, they're better than. So I think that deserves some respect in and of itself because this Howard team is not to be slept on, right? And there's always some talk about how the MEAC has this time to rest and in between the SWAC Championship. Well, at the end of the day, the SWAC also knows who they're going to play for a couple of weeks. They know this Howard team is coming. They know Howard's waiting in the wings. There's no surprise about it. So at the same time that Howard has this time to rest and they can sit around and do whatever, all right, after FAMU and PVU have a game planned for this SWAC championship game, I'm sure they've already looked ahead at Howard to take a peek and so how do we match up? What do we need to do? And how do we need to prepare for this team? Because we only have a week to do it after the SWAC championship.
Shout out to Howard. Howard made the Celebration Bowl. I think deep down in our hearts, we're all excited because, we want to see Howard in Atlanta have the brand that big in the Celebration Bowl on ABC. Everybody know Howard. The vice president, Kamala Harris, went to Howard. You got Thurgood Marshall, Howard Law, got Chadwick Boseman, Black Panther, rest in peace to him, from Howard. So folks know Howard, all right? But here's the consequence of HBCU football, right? So we have the Celebration Bowl. Our conferences in FCS are the only conferences that has an FCS bowl game. But you have the FCS playoffs, right? So if you're good enough and your record's good enough and you have the resume, you can make the FCS playoffs. And North Carolina Central made it with an at-large bid. They finished 9-2. They beat Elon. They beat Campbell. They beat their rival North Carolina A&T, who's in the CAA. They went 3-0 in the CAA in the regular season. They lost to Howard. So listen, they made the FCS playoffs. It was a lot of buzz around it. Davius Richard, Flicks, I think he's Steve McNair light. Like I know I wasn't alive for Steve McNair, but when I see Davius Richard and I look back at that tape, I see Steve McNair. Now I don't think he's as good as a passer as Steve McNair, because Steve McNair really could do both. But I see Steve McNair when I see Davius Richard. So I think we all thought that there was going to be a nice little run that North Carolina Central made in the playoffs, but it didn't happen. So it's been a lot of chatter in these HBCU streets about North Carolina Central losing in the playoffs and also not making the Celebration Bowl, even finishing the season 9-2 and 9-1 in the FCS. So my question to you is, do we view this season as a failure for North Carolina Central?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Postseason play definitely has a lot to do with it, but I don't think we thought Jackson State was a failure when they lost in the Celebration Bowl twice, even though they had the number one recruit in each class, 2021, 2022. So I don't think that's a good way to look at it. I will say that it's a decent measuring stick, right? When we talk about FCS playoffs and, dipping your toe in that water and seeing what you got, this Central team should have beat Richmond this past weekend. There's no doubt about it. And there's definitely some disappointment about it, because we saw a road for Central to go make a run for the Final Four, right? If they would have won this game, moving forward throughout this bracket, they had a pretty good chance. The game did not end up how they wanted it to end up. There were some injuries. And I will say this, there's injuries across every team at this point in the season. We're like at week 13 of college football season. If you're not out, you're injured. You're playing hurt. I think, unfortunately, during the game, Davius Richard ended up separating the shoulder, which was hard for anybody to take. And he still stays in the game and tries to do his Dougie out there. And he tried pretty honorably. But this Central defense, though, throughout the season, Central's defense has let them down. And the tough games, they have let them down. They have to have comebacks. If you don't remember, the Campbell game where Campbell got up on Central had to come back by about 20 points. That's on the defense. I mean, the offense ended up scoring around 40 points. 50 points to win it, but that's on the defense. And that same thing happened versus Howard also. And we saw the same thing against Richmond. Now, I think this Central team, in comparison to, the MEAC counterparts, the SWAC counterparts, I think they are still one of the best teams of HBCU football. I think at the end of the day, they'll probably end up in my top three based on who wins Celebration Bowl. But as far as the FCS playoffs, there was a very good article by HBCU Game Day where they went in, they talked to the head coach of Richmond, and the head coach of Richmond just put everything into perspective for us in saying that the FCS playoffs for Richmond means everything. Like, that is literally the only postseason berth that they can have. The whole season, they've been talking about playoff, whereas Central looks at the playoff as a consolation prize. In all honesty, it's a consolation prize. You're not going to be a top-seeded team. You're going to be an at-large team. You're probably going to have an away game. It isn't ideal for any HBCU. So I think that just that focus of the teams is that much different. And they take the games, they both take it serious, but I think there's a different competitive nature when you literally count down for 13 weeks for the playoffs and you're counting down for 13 weeks for the Celebration Bowl. Two different mindsets.
Let's zero back in on Davius Richard, right? We all think he's the best quarterback in HBCU football. I've gone as far, and I've not workshopped this. I said on the show, Flicks, I've not asked the old heads, all right? I've not asked the folks that was at Howard in the 90s when Jay Walker beat Steve McNair in a classic game against Alcorn, or the Alcorn faithful, or the Jackson State faithful. I haven't asked them or said my take on how Davius Richard is Steve McNair light. I think they'll disagree just off GP, but like it's hard really to go against that, because you just look at what he does. But my thing is this: you have Steve McNair. He was picked number 3 in the NFL draft. We haven't had a quarterback drafted since Tavarius Jackson in 2006 out of Alabama State. And we really want to see our guys get into the NFL, because that's an ambitious recruiting pitch for us. So with Davius Richard, his season and his career likely is over. I mean, he's a senior, so it's likely over. He wants to go to the NFL and get opportunity to play on that level. Do you think he'll get drafted? Do you think he'll be an undrafted free agent? Like, what do you think happens to Davius Richard come the spring?
It's a little early, and I will say I too have also been rooting for HBCU quarterbacks. I think it's very important that HBCU quarterback gets a shot at the next level. We haven't seen it yet. We've seen, a couple little short stints. I mean, we got to see our boy from Alcorn did get a shot at the Browns for a couple of days, so that was good. But we have a couple of very good prospects this year. But the kicker is it's a very good quarterback class this year. This is Jaden Daniels out there that may not even go first round. They're even talking about if Penix will go first round. So I think this is a loaded quarterback draft. But also, you look at the NFL, the need is at quarterback. So you got to expect a lot of guys to get snatched up this year. I think Davius Richard probably goes undrafted. I think he gets an invite to camp and gets a good look at camp. But I think what will be most important is going to be testing, right? The size and the strength of Davius will come out during testing. The 40 speed, getting to see him throw to different receivers and things like that, that's going to help him. I even hearing from on Davius' side on what's going on, I heard that even some of the passes that seem like they're a little out of reach actually might be in reach. So I'd like to see Davius Richard throw to some other receivers, get a chance at the HBCU Legacy Bowl, throw to some other guys that may be a little more talented than his guys in North Carolina Central. Maybe that also may not have been giving us the best look at Davius Richard. So I think in this next month will probably be the most pivotal time for Davius Richard. Right now, I'd have him as an undrafted free agent, as a camp guy, get an invite to camp, maybe make a practice squad. Because in all honesty, you talk about the depth of the NFL and these quarterbacks, I would use a guy like Davius Richard to be my backup to Jalen Hurts, right? Why would I have to change my offensive system because the backup quarterback comes in the game? Why can't I keep it the same, right? And so you look I look more in depth, talk about regionally. A lot of these guys, every player that is pretty much drafted regionally, that's usually around where they end up. They usually end up 1 or 2 states away. You know what I mean? We probably won't see Davius Richard over at the Chargers next year, right? It's probably going to be somewhere NFC South or AFC East, So I think that with Davius, the sky is the limit for him right now at this point. As long as he can get healthy enough to go ahead and, finish up that shoulder, get that shoulder together, get healthy enough to end up participating in all these different Senior Bowls and all this testing, I think that his drive stock can actually rise. A guy with that type of stature makes a lot of NFL guys go, oh, hold on, let me take a look at him at least for a second. So, hey, you give him the Steve McNair light. I think that he has it, right? And when you watch the film, you go, oh, okay, he has it. And that's what makes a scout go, I think I want that guy on my team.
I think that's pivotal because Davius is a playmaker. And what we see in the NFL today is that NFL game's sort of boring because those guys that were playmakers, you had the pocket passer guys, you had the Tom Brady's, you had the Peyton Mannings, you had the Matt Ryans, the guys that were pocket passers. Then you had your Michael Vicks, your Donovan McNabbs, you guys like that really were making plays, but they were looked down upon like, oh, y'all are running the ball. Can you throw? You're a glorified running back. But now it's sort of necessary that you make plays with your legs because the defense is so good. They have different schemes, the zone, the man. You have guys that can keep up with the wide receivers. So sometimes, like we saw with Jalen Hurts against the Bills, he had that game-winning drive, made it happen. I mean, you got to make plays at this point. So I like what you said about how Davius maybe can back up and Eagles in that system, their RPO, I think will do really well with that. But I got to just throw this out there before we move on. All right. The Falcons. Okay. You said, typically you stay in the area, stay at the NFC South. The Falcons, listen, Desmond Ridder ain't it. Get Davius Richard. Listen, he in Atlanta. All right. You got all the HBCUs down there. You can do some good stuff. All right. You draft the HBCU players before. Shador Knight is not coming out this year, okay? He gonna stay another year at Colorado. So get Davius now and lock down that spot at this point. I promise you, every HBCU football fan outside of like the Saints fans and the Cowboys fans will be Falcons fans, okay? I assure you, if you pick Davius Richard. You like the Falcons for Davius Richard flicks?
Right. That'd be super dope. And even choosing these teams, the only thing I have worried now, I got to bring it up because it is a thing. Only thing I am worried about with Davius Richard is if they say his arm talent isn't good enough and they want to switch his position. We've seen this a lot. Different quarterbacks, they'll move you to receiver, they'll move you to tight end. Sometimes these NFL draft, these scouts think they know more than anybody else in the world. And they think they see your talent and they understand it better than anybody else in the world. So hopefully, they don't try to move his position, change him or anything. Not to make this a little dark, but you got to bring up some possibilities because at the end of the day, it won't even be our choice. But I'm hoping, though, that he gets a shot down in NFC South, AFC East. I think there's a ton of positions that he could go at, especially not even thinking about starting, just be a backup because we see in the NFL now, starters go down like it's nothing. You need to have 1 or 2 guys. You got to have an extra practice squad guy in there. And if Davius gets a shot, I think Davius is going to shine in any situation that he ends up in the NFL.
I want to say this too. Another team I think is interesting because you said the Eagles' point about how he sort of fits that system. If Jalen Hurts goes down, you can slide in Davius Richard, and he can do sort of some of the same things that Jalen can do. Of course, Jalen has had more experience. He's had Super Bowl experience. Davius will have to sort of hop on that learning curve and step up, to that level. But you can sort of do some of the same things. The Ravens would be another good one as an insurance policy for Lamar. You just signed that new contract. Davius reminds me a lot of Lamar as well, because I think that he does well with his legs, makes great plays. He can go have a crazy run. He can evade tacklers. It's also hard to tackle him because Davius is a big dude. It's hard to tackle him too. So I think that the Ravens also would be a nice spot for him. And those are both my favorite teams, Falcons and the Ravens. So, just slide in, Flick. You know what I mean?
He fits both of those schemes. He needed a power runner at the quarterback position at times. And look, Davius Richard gets that done. You talked about the game where he had like 70 passing yards. He probably had about 200 rushing yards. He's just one of those guys. If I can't get it this way, I'm gonna get it this way. And you gotta love it from a quarterback.
Exactly, especially in this day and age. Davius is box office, so like they need to do something because we need some box office in the NFL because it's boring and college football has been way better this year. But anyway, okay, speaking of college football and the intricacies of it, so Flicks, you know how I feel about this next topic. FCS playoffs versus the Celebration Bowls. About a few weeks ago, I wrote an article where I did a case study. I didn't really provide an opinion. I just looked at the numbers. So I looked at the viewership numbers. I looked at the players drafted. I looked at the attendance numbers, sort of some factors that indicate success. Because you have the Celebration Bowl that is on ABC. It generates, roughly 2 million viewers. It got 1.9 million in 2019. You have the FCS Championship. A lot of those games that you're leading up to the FCS Championship are on ESPN Plus. A couple of them creeped up on ESPN and ESPN2 around bowl season. That last game before you got to the championship, we determined who they were. It was North Dakota State and South Dakota State last year. That was on ESPN during bowl season. But typically it's locked away on ESPN Plus. So then you get to the championship. They have it on ABC now. They moved it over, and the Celebration Bowl is routinely drawing more viewership than FCS playoffs. They draw more attendance than the FCS playoffs. But you have a lot of folks in HBCU life that are just committed to us being in the FCS playoffs, even when we know there's a guaranteed money payout for both teams, especially if you win. The fans like it. It's a cultural cachet. You're on ABC, and that's a big platform that we see from 2015 to 2023 that there's a lot of viewership for it, but folks are committed to the playoffs. So I know where you stand, Flicks. But I want you to tell the world, the radio and podcast audience, how you're feeling about this FCS playoffs versus Celebration Bowl debate.
It's really no debate. I think there's no debate. The top teams in FCS will probably agree with us, where I think Delaware will be interested in playing a bowl game rather than going to the FCS playoffs and trying to prove themselves against MVFC teams. And a big talking point in this whole scenario is the fact that HBCU conferences, the two HBCU conferences, the MEAC and the SWAC, don't have automatic bids, right? So any time that they will be invited to the playoffs will be in an at-large situation. If you don't know what that means, they probably will never have a bye. Okay, they'll probably always be in the toughest situation in a first round away game, and that's going to be it no matter what. When it comes to FCS playoffs versus the Celebration Bowl, I really don't think it's a versus. I think it actually works together, right? The Celebration Bowl attracts the two conference champions, and the other teams that were not able to make the conference championship or win it should now be able to qualify for the playoffs. I think if you're an HBCU supporter and you would like more FCS HBCU teams in the playoffs, then you would probably root for the 2 through 5 teams in the SWAC and in the MEAC. I think when it comes to the MVSC, when it comes to the Big Sky Conference, they're number 2 through 5 are extremely competitive. They're second place team, third place, fourth place, fifth place. I think Richmond might have been like a top 5 team in the CAA this year. So it all comes down to depth at the end of the day. If you're 2 through 5 can accumulate up to 8 wins, that's when you get some love, right? And this year, we got to see that from the MEAC, right? The MEAC was able to present us a second-place team that had 9 wins with North Carolina Central, right? We could have saw the same thing out of the SWAC this year. We could have had a SWAC and a MEAC member. The Alcorn State and Jackson State also had very good schedules to make it to the FCS playoffs. If they would have been 8 or 9 win teams, they probably also would have got an at-large bid to the playoffs. So I think that these two things work together. I think the Celebration Bowl is for the champions. The FCS playoffs is for the consolation prize at the end of the day, right? We don't see the same attendance numbers in the FCS playoffs. We don't see the same revenue in the FCS playoffs. It is simply the lower tier of the two. If North Dakota State and South Dakota State could play a bowl game at the end of the year every year, I promise you they would do it, right? At the end of the day, for these FCS schools, it's about making money, right? The big difference between the FCS and FBS is a lot of that money talk, right? And how do you even the playing ground? Well, that's having bowl games, right? That's having classics. Those type of games are going to make you the money that you want to make as a school at this level. So I think that for a lot of HBCU supporters, they look at this as a versus, Celebration Bowl versus the playoffs, when in actuality, it works together, right? We saw North Carolina Central, who may have been the number 1 HBCU team, go to the playoffs. And we're still going to see a great Celebration Bowl in spite of it.
And I think it's so interesting you said Delaware, because as you know, Delaware trying to go to FBS. So they're not trying to be in the playoffs. They trying to be in a bowl game, just like how James Madison, like they've been fighting and they had an amazing season and they're about to make a bowl game. Those fans are going to be up for that bowl game. The administration and those football players are going to be up for that bowl game. Like a lot of these teams move from the FCS to the FBS because it doesn't make money sense, because they want to get what the FBS has, which is a bowl game. We have a bowl game and we complaining. Because HBCU fans, one thing they know how to do is complain. And there are valid criticisms. I don't think that HBCUs are without reproach. And I've had my criticisms as well on several fronts. But I just think when it comes to the Celebration Bowl, we have to look at what makes sense. And Flicks, I said this to you before, this is the thing I don't understand when it comes to HBCU fans. I think HBCU fans look at college football as if it's the NFL or if it's the NBA. Like, oh, like, man, you got to win the playoffs. Is Patrick Mahomes really clutch? Is Josh Allen clutch? Is he really a top quarterback? Because he hasn't made, the AFC Championship. Or, hey, LeBron didn't make the finals. Is he really the GOAT? Like, that's how folks look at it when it is college football. In the pros, if you don't make the playoffs, that's an indictment on your coach. It's an indictment on the players. Narratives start to swirl. If you don't advance far in the playoffs, and we're saying Joel Embiid, for example, is an MVP, like, hey, that might be an indictment on him being a great player, saying, hey, you can't make it to the big game. You can't make a deep run in the playoffs. But I think that when you look at college football, it's different because it's a business within itself. You look at the FBS, there's a playoff system. With the playoff system, they're bowl games. You look at these other teams, it's a 14 playoff right now. It's going to expand to a 12-team playoff. You have multiple teams that want to get bowl eligible. It's not about, hey, I want to get to the playoffs, an at-large bid. They're trying to get a bid into the bowl games. The bowl game is the past, it's the present, it's the future. And we see, even as the FBS is expanding to a playoff system, it's still all about the bowl games. Those games are going to be bowl games where those 12 teams are going to receive payouts as they advance in that playoff system. And that's the thing that I don't understand. This is a uniquely football issue because we know that March Madness, we have HBCUs that qualify. We had an HBCU that have really made it. Cheney, for example, the women, like they made it all the way to the Final Four. We thought that Howard was going to do the impossible for a half. Then we got real. You know what I'm saying? But like it's a football issue. Like I don't necessarily have an issue per se with the other playoff systems in the other sports. We're talking about a uniquely football issue where football we know is one of the two revenue sports. We know that football is what the fans care about. And we know that football is a great recruiting tool. I know students that said that they went to their HBCU because of football. I know students and alumni that said they went to their school in general, PWI or HBCU, because of their athletics program. So you want to get money for it. Flicks, is it bad I want to get money, Flicks? Like, well, what's so bad about that, Flicks?
Ain't nothing wrong with getting paid, man.
There's nothing wrong with it. Like, they acting like, oh, all you want is to get money. You don't want to stack up. Like, man, Richmond don't want to stack up. What you mean? If you told Richmond, you know what? You beat North Carolina Central. Do you want to go to the Celebration Bowl? They'd be like, like let's celebrate.
They'll pay their own way.
Right, like that. They'll be like celebrate good times. You know what I'm saying? Like that,
Right.
like they'll learn the electric slide. They'll learn the Cupid shuffle. Like they go like I'm telling you, they'll be there because they want to be in a bowl game. We have something that folks leave the FCS to get, and we're not satisfied. I know we want better, and we do want our HBCUs to be in a situation where we can say that we're the best. But at the same time, I don't think that we're sacrificing that at this point. I think that we're, number one, we're getting that exposure, we're getting that money, and we're showcasing our culture and our history and our brand of football to the world. But at the same time, we're getting out of a dying system to a point, because the FCS playoff system, as it is, does not work.
The thing to me is that we got the best of both worlds this year, right? We got a MEAC team in the playoffs, and we got the SWAC and the MEAC champion that's going to be in the celebration. But we got the best of both worlds. What would really be the true difference? Like, is FAMU going to the playoffs that serious? And look, say if FAMU does go to the playoffs, if they lose first round, North Carolina Central loses first round, what do we have from this season to take away from at all? You know what I mean? So I think there's also a strong point in really understanding what is your team's aspiration? What's your team's goals, right? Like, this circling back to what the Richmond coach said, at the whole season, their goal was to make it to the FCS playoffs. That's their Super Bowl. Like, I'm pretty sure seniors cried when they were announced as a team that's going to make it to the FCS playoffs. They get one more game. And to me, Central was probably like, well, we got one more game. It's a different situation. And that overall mindset goes into changing the teams. And like I'm saying, if those 2 through 5 teams get better in the MEAC and the SWAC, they'll also be in the playoff. And I think that should be the goal. If we can have a deeper conference full of teams of 7 and 8 wins, they'll probably end up getting a shot at that next postseason berth that we're all asking everybody to get, apparently.
Listen, Flix, I'm going to tell you something I just thought about. It's crazy when a white person tells a black person, man, listen, you're so privileged.
The cold role reversal right there.
Like, it's like I'm aspiring to pay money to advance in the playoffs. You get hundreds of thousands of dollars and be on ABC in front of the world. Like, oh, man, you so lucky. Like,
1.5 million to change your mind, boy.
Won't it? And then the exposure, just like the events around it. Like, I really want HBCU football fans to stop complaining. Like, I just don't understand the problem, because what I think is valid is this. I think it's valid that maybe we should do what North Carolina Central did as HBCU programs and schedule tough teams within our divisions. I think that that's something that is valid. Like how North Carolina Central, they faced Elon. Last year, they faced New Hampshire. This year, they faced Campbell again after Campbell beat them. I think that that's fair. I wouldn't be mad if Richmond, maybe to open up the season next season, if they could put Richmond back on their schedule. I'm not mad at that, nor am I mad at what the MEAC does when they'll play FCS teams after they do the money games. But my thing is that we have to accept having a good thing. We talk about media rights. We talk about money allocations for teams, all these different things. You get upwards of hundreds of thousands to $1 million being in the Celebration Bowl. Your recruitment is going up being in the Celebration Bowl. Your branding opportunities are going up in the Celebration Bowl. Your alumni activations from both your alumni that are boosters, that really are out recruiting, that are out giving money, but also your notable alumni. It's really within the realm of possibility that Vice President Kamala Harris might show up to the Celebration Bowl. We joking, but she was at the March Madness tournament against Kansas. She was there. She's talked to the team. We got it on video. Who's to say she won't pull up to Atlanta and be at the game? Lance Gross, Anthony Anderson, like Taraji P. Henson. Who's to say they won't come? Will Packer for FAMU, Rob Hardy. Like, who's to say they won't say, you know what? Let's do a movie based on the Celebration Bowl. Who to say they won't bring some cameras? Like, I really want us to open our minds to the fact that college football, more than any other sports that is in America, is a business. And yes, the NBA is a business. Yes, the NFL is a business. Yes, MLB, all these other professional leagues. But it goes down to play over there, Flicks. Like, it's about how you play. But over here, it's about the money and branding opportunities to lift your athletic programs up so you can compete in resources to make it and continue to win season after season and get good players in and build a legacy and build a lineage. But I want to give it to you, Flicks. Final word on this, although we know when this comes out, it ain't going to be the final word. Folks have a lot to say.
I mean, I look at the Celebration Bowl like one of the New Year's Six Bowls. You know, I honestly think it should be, if they can, move it to January, have it around the Rose Bowl, have it around the Orange Bowl. I think that this is just as prestigious as all the rest of those bowls, not just because of the crowd, not just because of the payouts. Those are just, you know, things that go with it, but because this Celebration Bowl has become historic. I think there's nothing like it. Even now, you know, non-HBCU watchers are watching the Celebration Bowl at the end of the year. They might not have ESPN Plus, they might not have HBCU Go, HBCU Plus, but they might not be able to see any of those games. But around Celebration Bowl time, they asking me, yo, Flicks, who's in it this year? Is it Jackson State? Is that Richard kid back in it? Because they honestly have seen the games. You know, this is one of the games, I think probably the one game that if you watch the HBCU football game, it's going to be the Celebration Bowl. And it's great to see that two champions will be showcasing their talent for a game for the nation. And I'm not going to be honest, the world is probably watching. Look at that viewership. It's probably the world.
I just think that we have to look at the money element. Look at what's happening to the Pac-12. It's about money in FBS too. So why can't we be about our check as well? Because they gave up a lot of rivalries. They gave up a lot of good games to leave. So I'm just saying, if they can be about their money, why can't we be about our money? But we will leave it there, and we'll talk about another playoff matchup real quick. Benedict. Now, you know I'm a Fort Valley State University graduate. All right, Flicks. And you listen, you know, you rocking with all the D2 HBCUs, man. You rock with Morehouse every two, man. You got a lot of love for Morehouse, man. So I got to ask you, man, Benedict lost 35-25 in the Division II playoffs. They had a first round bye. They lost in the second round. It was on their home field because the playoff system in Division II, we don't like it either. But at the very least, like a Benedict, a really good team, a Tuskegee and Albany State, you might can get a first round bye. Bowie can get a first round bye or something of that nature, or maybe even host a home game in the Division II playoff system. But, you know, Benedict, they had a great season, but a lot of folks are looking at this game crazy. So I wanted to ask you real quick, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, so I've had a little bit of time for it to settle. You know what I mean? I know we had the Twitter space at the end of the night on Saturday speaking about it, but I share the same sentiments now. I think that this Benedict team, they're still respected for this loss. You know what I mean? It's a loss. I'm disappointed in Benedict in losing. I thought they could have really made a run in the D2 playoffs, you know, and go get invited to the Gulf South Invitational and go handle some business. But, you know, first thing first was having to deal with Lenore Ryan. And really Lenore Ryan, they're a force. They're a force. We watched two very good teams go head to head, right? And if you haven't been watching D2 football, you probably wouldn't know the difference. But Lenore Ryan is a very strong team, right? They average around 40, 50 points a game, right? Even to hold them to 35 was a decent job by Benedict, but they allowed too many yards in this game. The Benedict defense that we know and love, they were there, but they weren't as strong as they usually are, right? This defensive line got about 4 sacks this game, which was pretty good for them, but they weren't able to get the necessary stops to win this game. At the end of the day, Benedict was chasing this game, right? After halftime, Benedict led the game. There weren't some adjustments that were made on Benedict's side that I think led to a 14-point deficit in the third quarter. I think that's what hurt Benedict the most. And by the end of the fourth quarter, we saw a Benedict team and the offense was rolling, but they were just simply trying to play catch up, right? And the 4-minute drill turned into a 2-minute drill, turned into a last possession of the game. And, you know, it broke our hearts. But I would say that this Benedict team, they really came out and they came out swinging, right? We saw Aeneas Dennis throw for 370 yards, right? We saw our receiver Reggie at Benedict go 6 catches for about 200 receiving yards. I haven't mentioned the boy's name all year, right? But he came out playing. Caden High, the young freshman at Benedict, wide receiver, looked very good out there. He came out and showed he looked like he'd been out there for 3 or 4 years. He's making a lot of big catches, moving the sticks on defense. Jerron Kilpatrick looked pretty good. He ended up having an interception. But I think at the end of the day, this defense got really tired. Lenore Ryan kept pushing. And for Benedict to win this game, I've been trying to figure out the past couple of days, how could they have won this game? Defensively, they needed more turnovers. At the end of the day, they had to get the team to turn it over more. And a lot of these Benedict dominant wins in the second half, they began to create turnovers. They create chaos. They didn't create much chaos in the second half, right? There were a lot trying to tackle guys, chasing guys and they weren't able to enforce their will. If Benedict was more aggressive in this game and attacking, not trying to play catch up, they might have ended up on the winning side of things.
Let's talk about the SWAC Championship. So we know FAMU, they've been red hot. They've been doing their thing. They only lost 2 games in the SWAC in the 3 seasons that they've been in the conference, and both of them have been to Deion Sanders and Jackson State. Deion left. They started to roll. They beat Jackson State to start the year. They had sort of a close one against Alabama State, but they won that game. They beat Southern. They beat any team in the SWAC that was put in front of them, including their opponent, Prairie View A&M, where on homecoming, they had a party, Flicks. So Prairie View, FAMU are going at it again. Who do you think wins this game and why?
Oh, man. I think, honestly, think it's going to be a better game than everybody thinks it's going to be. You know, after the homecoming game, they put hands on Prairie View. I can't lie. They put some hands on them boys, and it was a home game. This is also going to be a home game. I did hear that this game isn't sold out. I'm sure it's going to be close to it, and I'm sure everybody's there going to be super loud. Part of it is this is FAMU's first SWAC championship, right? So emotions are going to be running extremely high. We're going to see some players out there running extremely fast and really doing their thing, gets their assignment. But when it comes to the game, I'm looking forward to Jeremy Musa having a pretty good game. He's going to have a really interesting matchup with the other quarterback, Trayvon Conley, down there at Prairie A&M. Conley has had a very weird year, right? Last year was a weird year for him. They kind of have him under low volume. You know, I think he was under 200 pass attempts last year. This year, they kind of let him just go, but he's kind of been a turnover machine. So there's a part of this that goes, if Prairie A&M really wants to get into this game, they're going to have to rely on Trayvon Conley to really keep them around. I haven't checked the spread on this, but I'm sure FAMU's probably favored by about maybe 10 points or more. I'd be inclined to agree with that. I think that this FAMU team does very well on offense, defense, special teams, you know, the 3-pronged attack. And that's what's really hard enough to stop, because you want to find a chink in FAMU's armor. And sometimes they have these big, slow starts. And it's like maybe they don't show up to the second half. But their special teams is always on point. You got Marcus Riley back there, a pretty good kicker, good punter. And their defense, oh, man, so much to say about their defense. They had a guy, Isaiah Majors. He's on the finalists. He's on the pretty much the final 25 for the Buck Buchanan Award. So they have some guys on that defense. It might not be Isaiah Land and guys like that that's getting to the quarterback, but this defense swarms to the ball, pretty good on the back end. Kendall Bowler's probably going to be one of the top HBCU draft prospects, around 6'2", 6'3", cornerback, real rangy guy, great hands. So I think FAMU really has a lot going for him in this game, and I'd be inclined to think that FAMU's going to win this game by a lot of points.
I think so too, and what I'll say is this. You said you haven't checked the betting odds, but FAMU's probably favored. Because the FAMU's favored by God, okay? I'll tell you that much. This is divine timing. Do you know how long they want to make the Celebration Bowl? And they a game away, and we think they're going to lose to Prairie View. Like, no, if this is a freezing cold take, I will take it. They going to win. Like, they should have made it 2019. I tell Ariella all the time, because Ariella, she's an A&T alum. I tell her all the time, like, we both know, because A&T beat FAMU that year. But then they got on probation with NCAA. They should have made the Celebration Bowl in 2019 against Alcorn, which I don't know. I don't know what would happen. Maybe they would have won. And maybe they would, and that might have changed. Maybe they would have wanted to go to the SWAC. Maybe the MEAC, it would have kept FAMU. But we don't know. We can't go back in time. This ain't Back to the Future. You know what I mean? But I tell you what, FAMU, they're going to advance to their future, which is the Celebration Bowl, or should we call it the Hollywood Bowl? Oh my God. Will Packer coming? Okay, we know Steph Curry, he can't come. He playing the game, Flex. He playing the game, all right? He gonna be watching for Howard. Cause I checked. I checked. I'm not gonna lie. So he playing the game, but he might be watching because he got ABC down there. West Coast, he got ABC. LeBron. Now we gotta see. That's the wild card is LeBron. All right, because LeBron around December, they be playing Atlanta.
Right. We gotta check that Lakers schedule, man. They have any Hawks games around there? We gotta check.
Right, because you remember last year they played around his birthday, so he might have it a little bit earlier in December. So listen, LeBron may pull. You might see LeBron on the sidelines with the FAMU hoodie. He might rock some new FAMU LeBrons with the orange and green. So you never. That's what we need to talk about. You gave a great breakdown. I have no game analysis at this point because FAMU's gonna win. All right, but we got to figure out. Like we got to get the RSVP list at this point because FAMU is gonna win this game.
Right. I think most important is FAMU comes out of this healthy too. You know, win is one thing, but coming out of this unhealthy would be even bigger blow. You know, got to keep Jerry Musa upright. Got to keep a lot of these receivers, keep them upright. The Marcus Riley's, John Marie Cherise, you know, they come out of this healthy, or at least fairly healthy. I'm pretty sure all the players now at this point are like probably 70% of 100, you know, playing 12, 13 games, body beat down, right? But make it one more game, right? Because I just kind of remember that SWAC championship game where Juwan Pass goes down for Prairie A&M. And then we actually get to see the first taste of Trayvon Conley in the SWAC championship. But it changed the game so much. It changed it so much. Prairie came in, and it's like, maybe Prairie has a chance against Jackson State. And then Juwan Pass goes down, and it's all hell breaks loose, man. Trayvon Conley throwing it backwards. They don't know where to throw it. The defense look discombobulated. So injuries do play a role. And I mean, I will say in postseason play, you want to stay healthy, you want to come in healthy, but depth is also the biggest thing, right? If your guys can step up and make plays, kind of saw it with Central last week when Davis went down. If on the backup quarterback, he couldn't move the ball. That was a problem, right? And Davies knew he had to get back in and keep them in the game. So with FAMU, man, as long as they stay healthy, I think there's no reason why they can't beat up on Prairie A&M this weekend.
Yeah, so it's going to be good. Listen, it's going to be on ESPN2. It's going to be at Bragg Memorial Stadium on Ken Riley Field. I love it. Ken Riley Field. Shout out to Ken Riley and the family of Ken Riley. Rest in peace, Ken Riley, the legend, the Rattler. All right. So listen, making it happen. We think FAMU gets the win, but Prairie View is a great team. All joking aside, Prairie View is a great team. And like you always say, Flicks, it's rare that you get to play a team twice. So I think that Prairie View, you know, I think that they'll play them a little bit differently than they did before. But I want to, you know, first and foremost, Flicks, thank you for coming on, for filling in. Ario's going to be back. We're super excited. We're going to have Ario back real soon. But, man, let us know where we can find you, how we can support you.
Yeah. Oh, man, thanks for having me on, man. It's been a very good time. I had a great time on here at HBCU Post. But, yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, @KellyFlix, man. I'm on Instagram with the same handle, @KellyFlix. And on YouTube, I'm on the Laceup Podcast Network, man. Beginning to build it and grow it out. I have a weekly show. I kind of put it on hiatus right now, but it'll be back. It's on ice. But yeah, mainly talking about HBCU football, breaking down Division I, Division II level, and even NAIA. Shout out to Florida Memorial. Shout out to Langston out there. So yeah, mainly HBCU football. Get with me, man. @KellyFlix.
Like what you hear?
Yeah.
Subscribe to HBCU Pulse Radio on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, head to hbcupulse.com to stay up to date on what's going on in the HBCU community. Thank you for listening to HBCU Pulse Radio.